The Times reports that Prince Harry now wants to return to Britain every few months. Not for a single visit, not for one ceremony, but as a standing rhythm, a life that keeps pulling him back toward the country he walked away from. That report lands just after a confirmed family meeting at Highgrove, where Harry, Meghan, and their 2 children spent time with King Charles and Queen Camilla. It is the first real contact of its kind in years, 6 years after the Sussexes stepped away from working royal duties and built a new base in America. So the question almost asks itself, is this ordinary family contact and a little charity travel, or is something older sliding back into place? The split life arrangement Harry and Meghan first proposed all the way back in 2020. Because their plans have changed so many times that the changing has become the story. The privacy they said they wanted, the titles they kept, the duties they lost, Canada, and then California, the passing talk of American citizenship. The years spent fighting over security, the public wish for reconciliation with his father and his brother, and now these renewed visits to Britain. Every one of those turns looks like a reversal. Seen together though, something stays perfectly still underneath. What kept shifting was never the goal, only the map, and returning to Britain, as it turns out, is not the same thing as returning to royal duty. On its own, a report that Harry wants to fly to Britain more often is barely a headline. He has family here, charities here, a competition he founded here. Frequent visits would be the ordinary consequence of all of it. What makes this particular report worth stopping on is not the travel. It is the shape of the travel. According to the Times, the visits Harry has in mind are built around his British charitable ties, his long connection to Wellchild, and the return of the Invictus Games to Birmingham. This is not a man planning to drop in once a year for a single ceremony and vanish again. The reported plan is a recurring relationship with Britain, spread across the calendar, coming back every few months rather than once in a while. And it arrives on the back of something already confirmed, that July gathering at Highgrove, where Harry, Meghan, and their children sat down with the King and Queen for the first time in a very long while. With the travel and the meeting side by side, the story stops looking like a one-off. It starts looking like a direction. And that is where it becomes strangely familiar. Because back in 2020, before the years of distance, before California, the very first thing Harry and Meghan proposed in public was a life divided between Britain and North America. Not a clean break, a split. Time earning a living abroad, and time here, close to the family and the institution without being fully inside it. Lined up, the 2 plans leave almost no gap between them. 6 years of upheaval, courtrooms, interviews, a memoir, an entire ocean of separation, and the destination Harry now reportedly wants looks a great deal like the map he drew at the very beginning, repeated presence in Britain. A base kept somewhere else, service and charity attached to his own name rather than to the crown. That resemblance is real, and it deserves to be said plainly. A travel pattern that rhymes with an old request is not the same thing as anyone agreeing to that request. No working role has been handed back, no official arrangement restored. The similarity sits in the geography, not in any deal. But the geography is exactly what makes it interesting. If the newest plan lands this close to the oldest one, then the oldest plan is worth a much closer look. Not the gentle version people remember now, the one that gets described as a simple wish for a quieter life. The actual proposal, written down in their own words. What did Harry and Meghan genuinely ask for in 2020, and what did the institution actually give them in return? So the words themselves are where this settles. When Harry and Meghan announced their intentions in early 2020, the popular memory is that they quit, that they resigned, packed their bags, and chose an ordinary private life away from all of it. Read the actual statement, and that is not what it says. Their January statement proposed to step back as senior members of the royal family, to become financially independent, to divide their time between Britain and North America, and to carry on supporting the Queen. Every clause of that is a request to keep something, keep the connection, keep the standing, keep a foot inside the family and the institution while loosening the obligations that came attached to it. This is the detail that gets sanded down in the retelling. They did not ask to vanish. They asked for a reduced senior role, a lighter version of the job, with the income rules lifted so they could earn on the outside. Less duty and more freedom, while holding on to the titles and the profile that made the freedom worth having in the first place. The institution's answer was not the halfway house they had sketched. Within days, the Queen described a period of transition, with time split between Canada and the United Kingdom. And by the middle of that month, the terms had turned harder and plainer. Harry and Meghan would step back from royal duties altogether. The His Royal Highness style would no longer be used in practice. Their official office would close. Public funding would give way to private money. For a time, Frogmore was still expected to stay their family home in Britain. The shape of that exchange is stark. They proposed a reduced role. They were left with no role. They proposed to keep supporting the Queen in an official capacity. That official capacity was taken away. The one thing they were largely allowed to keep was the part that costs the institution nothing and hands them the most, the titles. Duke and Duchess of Sussex stayed. The working machinery around them did not. So the first great reversal in this whole saga, the one people file under betrayal or heartbreak, was really something much plainer. It was the gap between what they asked for and what they were permitted. They wanted the meaningful pieces of royal life, the recognition, the platform, the access, the standing, without the full structure of control and duty that keeps those pieces in place. And the palace, faced with that request, said no to the working version of it. What the documents do reveal is the pattern. A couple who wanted royal advantages on lighter terms, and an institution that refused to let royal advantages float free of royal work. Which leads straight to the story almost everyone tells about why they left. The privacy story. The idea that all of this was really about escaping the cameras and living quietly, out of the public eye, held up to the light. That idea does not survive contact with what Harry and Meghan actually said they wanted. The privacy story rests on an assumption. It assumes that two people who wanted to be left alone would, having got their wish, choose silence. That the whole point was to close the door and stay behind it. That is not the plan they published, and it is not the life they went on to lead. Their own material from 2020 is careful and specific. They spoke about independence, about revising the way they dealt with the media, about protecting themselves from unwanted intrusion. They also spoke about continuing to communicate, about carrying on their charitable work, and about the freedom to earn a living. Nowhere in any of it is there a promise to retire from public life. The word that keeps getting fastened to them afterward, privacy, is doing far more work than their statement ever asked it to do. There is a real difference between two things that get blurred together. One is intrusion, the long lens over the garden wall, the story nobody consented to, the pursuit that can turn dangerous. Wanting protection from that is legitimate, and the courts exist partly to hold that line. The other thing is disclosure, deciding what the public gets to know, and when, and in whose words. Those two are not opposites. A person can fight the first while steadily expanding the second. And expand it they did. In the years after stepping back, Harry and Meghan sat for interviews that traveled around the world. They made a documentary series built around their own lives. They launched a podcast. He wrote a memoir that held very little back. There were public ventures, deals, appearances. This is not the footprint of a couple who wanted the cameras switched off. It is the footprint of a couple who wanted the cameras pointed where they chose, on their schedule, carrying their version of events. So the contradiction people sense is real, but it usually gets described the wrong way. It was never privacy against publicity in any simple sense. It was a fight against intrusion they had not authorized, running right alongside a deliberate release of the most personal material imaginable. Their marriage, the rift with his family, their mental health, life inside the institution. They did not want the microphone taken away. They wanted their own hands on it. Which raises the next question. If disappearing was never truly the plan, if staying visible remained central to the whole enterprise, then something had to keep that visibility valuable. Something had to make the world go on watching after the official duties were gone. And that something was the very thing they were allowed to keep. The titles. That is what came through the settlement more or less intact. Stripped of the working role, stripped of the His Royal Highness style in everyday practice, Harry and Meghan still walked away as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Several separate things had been bundled together in that old royal package, and they did not all leave at the same moment. Being a working royal, drawing public funding, holding official patronages on behalf of the crown, using the royal style, carrying the title, doing public service. These are not one single thing. They can be separated. And when the Sussex arrangement was settled, they were separated. The working status went, the public money went, the official capacity went, the title stayed, the recognition stayed, the service they went on doing, only now beneath their own banner. And they did go on doing it. Invictus, the games Harry built for wounded service personnel. His long relationship with Wellchild, the Archwell operation, the couple set up to hold their charitable and commercial work. This is genuine activity, real events, real causes, real effort. It is not nothing. But what it is not matters just as much. None of it runs on the crown's authority. None of it answers to the palace, sits inside the official framework, or carries the accountability that comes with a formal royal role. It is service they command, on their terms, in their name. And the Duke and Duchess titles travel alongside it, lending every appearance a weight that Archwell on its own could never manufacture. Take the royal identity away, and a great deal of the interest walks out the door with it. That is the quiet engine underneath this whole saga. Royal duty became unacceptable to them. Royal identity never did. The obligations were the part they would not accept, the control, the schedule, the answering to an institution, and yet the value attached to the status, the doors it opens, the attention it guarantees, the standing it confers, that they held on to and kept using. Wanting the worth of the crown without the work of the crown is not independence. It is a wish to be treated as royal while refusing to be governed as royal. And that is about as clean a definition of entitlement as this story offers. So the identity explains why the world kept watching. It explains how a private couple in California still commanded coverage fit for heads of state. What it does not explain is geography. If the status works anywhere, if it carries just as well on a stage in America as on a lawn at Windsor, then why did Britain refuse to fade into irrelevance? Why, with the base now firmly in California, did the question of coming back turn into a fight that dragged on for years? The address itself keeps moving. When the transition was first announced, the map pointed at Canada and Britain. That was the language at the very start, a life shared between the two. Canada did not last. Within the year, the center of gravity had slid south, and it settled in California, where it has stayed ever since. By 2024, that base was more than a matter of paparazzi photographs and property records. In an official filing tied to his Travelist work, Harry was formally identified as usually resident in the United States. That is about as settled as a declaration of home gets. America was no longer the escape hatch. It was the address. He has spoken, only glancingly, about American citizenship, saying the idea had crossed his mind but was not a priority. That is not the language of a man in a hurry to trade one country for another. And that hesitation is the first sign that the story of where Harry lives and the story of what Harry wants from Britain are not the same story at all. Because at the very moment he was naming America his home, Harry was locked in a long and bitter legal fight over Britain. The dispute was about security, the protection arrangements applied to him during visits to the United Kingdom after his royal status changed. He carried it through the courts, and in 2025, the Court of Appeal ruled against him. He lost. The details of how anyone at that level is guarded stay confidential, and they should. This was never about the mechanics. It is about what the fight itself reveals. A man who had truly written Britain off, who wanted nothing more to do with the place, does not spend years and a fortune in legal fees battling for the ability to return to it safely. Nobody fights that hard for a door they never mean to walk through again. Security worries can weigh on any family's travel, and that is real, but the sheer persistence of the fight says something plainer. Britain was still part of the life he wanted. So California answered one question and left another wide open. It answered where they live. Their home is in America, and by Harry's own formal account, his usual residence is settled there. What it never answered was what relationship Harry still wanted with the country he came from. Those turned out to be two separate questions, and the second one refused to close. And that unfinished relationship with Britain splits on a closer look into two strands that get constantly tangled together. One is the family, his father, his brother, the people he is related to. The other is the institution, the role, the duty, the working machinery of the monarchy. When Harry says he wants to come home, everything depends on which of those two he means, and they are nowhere near the same thing. Harry has actually answered this one, in his own words, and the answer deserves to be taken seriously. In an interview he gave, he said plainly that he wanted his father back, and he wanted his brother back, and he drew a line straight through the middle of the whole affair with a single phrase. He said he wanted a family, not an institution. That distinction is the key to the entire headline confusion. Family and institution are two different things wearing the same crown. One is a father and a son, two brothers, grandchildren, and a grandfather in a room together. The other is an office, a payroll, a constitutional role with duties bolted to it. Harry told the world he wanted the first. He said nothing about wanting the second one handed back. And the July gathering at Highgrove fits that reading exactly. Buckingham Palace confirmed that Harry, Meghan, and their children spent time with the King and Queen. After years of distance and very public wounds, that is a genuine thaw. Real contact, a parent and child in the same room again, the grandchildren there for it. It is the family strand moving forward, visibly, for the first time in a long while. What the meeting did not come with is just as telling. There was no statement restoring a royal role. There was no working position returned. The boundary set out in 2021, that Harry and Meghan would not come back as working members of the family, still stands precisely where it stood. Time with your father, however meaningful, is not a reinstatement to the firm. The palace confirmed a reunion. It did not confirm a job. And this is where the current story trips over its own feet. A man can walk back toward his father without walking back into the monarchy. He can mend the relationship and never once touch the role. Those two returns are being blended into a single story, and that blending is exactly what turns a private family visit into a headline about a royal comeback. The evidence for the family drawing closer is real, and it is on the record. The evidence for the institution reopening its doors is simply not there, which leaves one last thing to settle. If the family is moving and the institution is not, if the geography is quietly circling back while the working role stays firmly shut, then beneath every twist and every reversal, something is held perfectly steady this entire time. And once that something has a name, the whole pattern snaps into focus. Here is the thing that never moved. Through every relocation, every interview, every court date, every headline announcing some brand new plan, Harry and Meghan wanted the same thing: independence from the palace's control, without losing the value of what the palace gave them. They wanted reduced duty, and they kept the status. They wanted independence, and they kept their public importance. They built a life in America, and they never loosened their grip on Britain. Harry wants his family back, but not the institution's authority over him. They kept serving the public, but only beyond the palace's command. Every one of those is the same shape. Keep the piece that has worth, shed the piece that carries obligation. And that is why the plans kept changing. Not because the couple were confused, and not because they were hounded from one place to the next. The plans changed because nothing built on the outside could ever reproduce what they left behind. No podcast, no production deal, no private foundation, no title standing on its own gives you the authority, the protection, the recognition, and the access that came bundled into a working royal role. They gave up the single arrangement that held all of that together, and then spent 6 years trying to rebuild it, piece by piece, on their own terms. The plans kept shifting, because the pieces never quite added back up to the whole. So the latest report, held up against all of that, reads very differently. Harry wanting to return to Britain every few months is not a royal comeback. It is the final missing piece of the original design clicking into place. The thing actually reassembling is unmistakable. An American base, regular presence in Britain, the titles still intact, the family drawing closer, public service carried out on their own authority. That is not the monarchy taking Harry back. That is the hybrid arrangement they proposed in 2020, quietly coming together in fact, precisely because nobody ever had to agree to it. They built it themselves, one court case and one visit at a time. So no working royal return is demonstrably imminent. Nothing on the record points to one. The geography is circling home, and the geography is all that is circling home. The latest plan can deliver the flights, the charities, the reunions, and the visits. What it cannot deliver is the one thing that made royal status more than a personal brand: the official role, the duty, the place inside the institution. Harry can stand on the lawn at Highgrove as often as he likes. He cannot stand there as a working prince. And that gap between being near the crown and actually wearing it is the space this entire story has been living in from the start. It is exactly what they gave up, and it is exactly what no amount of coming back will ever hand them again. And if you want to see why getting through the palace door is not the same as getting a royal rollback, watch The Palace Gave Harry a Meeting, Not a Victory.